Okay. Okay, comrades. First thing I want to do is welcome everybody to the meeting, and especially to welcome Raymond, who is a friend of many, many years at this stage, and a respected friend, somebody who has an intimate knowledge of the subject today, which is France. There's a big agenda in the consciousness of the world class of the last couple of weeks in France, with the fear, first of all, the awareness of the risks in France if the fascists had achieved power through being elected to government. There was also the issue of the question of how the working class, and more important, not more importantly, but very importantly, how the parties and representatives of the working class would react, would behave themselves, would prepare, and how France has to fail or has to deal with the consequences now of a left-based government possibly coming to power with the distrust of a capitalist party supporting it and the enemy still not gone away. So we'd ask Raymond to clarify as much as he can what has led up to the present situation, what's likely to be the outcome, and the roles that the various parties and leaders, especially those who claim to represent the working class, will play in the next period. I also want to say that both Ed and Joe have French language abilities, and if anybody wishes to speak in French, both they or Raymond can assist. And if anybody wants clarification, again, we can refer to the comrades to translate to English. I understand Raymond is going to give us the main speech in English, and we welcome that. So it's your stage now, Raymond.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. I'm very happy to be with you and to see friendly faces, because I know some of you since a long time, as you said. Forgive me if I'm reading, because I haven't spoken English for a long time, and forgive me if I must stop during the meeting for 5 minutes, because I'm on call for job. It's possible that my phone rings. Anyway, to introduce the discussion, I will try to answer some of the questions asked by Roger in the text of invitation to this meeting. The first one is about a possible drop of support for the national rally, Rassemblement National in French, between the two rounds of the presidential elections. In fact, there was no drop of support. They gained ground everywhere, winning over 10 million votes. But what's happened is that all their enemies, from the far left to the liberals and to the French equivalent of the Tories, joined forces, preventing them from winning a majority in parliament. If we had, for example, the British electoral system, the National Rally would have had an absolute majority in parliament with more than 55% of the MPs. To understand the electoral momentum, let's look at a few figures from just 1 month ago. They received 31% of the vote at the European election. They received 33% of the votes at the first round of the parliamentary elections, and they received 37% of the votes at the second round. As it rightly said in the blog for today's meeting, the National Rally, it's a threat for the workers. This is correct in terms of what we Marxists understand as the general interest of the workers. But to fully understand what we are dealing with, it's fundamental to know that the National Rally, it's by far the party with the largest audience amongst the popular classes in France. For example, they receive 51% of the vote of the blue-collar workers, and they receive 54% of the vote of the employees. And if you compare the left and the National Rally, if you take the population without diploma in France, the left receive 15% of their votes, and the National Rally 59% of their votes. And if you take in opposite the population with a master degree, the left receive 40% of the votes, and the National Rally only 14% of the votes. So, Jimmy, you talk about you use the word fascist.
Mm.
If the National Rally has roots, historical roots in the French far right, at this stage, it's a party very different from other nationalist parties in Europe. On the social issues, is on the left on Macron. In fact, it's a kind of a Bonapartist and nationalist party with a strong dose of populism. And the National Rally address issues who are neglected by the left, like the migrant crisis and problems of security. This result, the result of the elections, showed that the French political crisis, in my opinion, opened since the Yellow Vest revolt, continues and worsens. This crisis has French characteristics, but participates of an European and international movement. Following its success in the European elections, 30 MEP elected, the National Rally has just taken the helm of a brand new group in the European Parliament. This group includes supporters of Viktor Orban, the Northern League in Italy, two parties in the Czech Republic, the PPV in Netherlands, the FPO in Austria, Vox in Spain, and others. So what it means? At the present time, I think that we can say that the neoliberal production order is in crisis, and in the absence of a workers' and socialist alternative, it is the far right that it's expressing the search for another form of regulation. The invitation to this meeting asks if the shadow has been lifted of far-right presidency in 3 years' time. To my opinion, absolutely not. The National Rally strength lies in presenting its competitors as part of the establishment and part of the system, a system at the service of globalism. And what had just happened now prove to their voters that is the truth. So, as the same causes produce the same results, I'm betting that in 2 years' time, the National Rally will be ever stronger than now. Let's talk a bit about the left now. The choice of Melenchon to join force with the Socialists, the Communists, the Greens was unprincipled as long as Melenchon pretended to want a so-called citizen revolution and unite the people against oligarchy. He had also, in the past, a strong opposition to European Union with the slogan, Europe, change it or leave it. During all the period from 2010 to 2017, Mélenchon refused any kind of political agreement with the Socialist Party. Mélenchon's movement has field candidates in all the elections and often refused to give instructions for the second rounds. For example, in 2017 presidential election, a vote was organized amongst Mélenchon supporters between the two rounds of the presidential election. I was member, I participated to this vote at this epoch. 1/3 choose a vote for Macron, and 2/3 choose to abstain. The result was a refusal by Mélenchon to give any vote instruction. So it was a position in 2017, and now we are in 2024, and they have kind of common agreement since for the election, even with Macron, and they call to vote for Macron in 2022. Starting from nothing, Mélenchon managed to win 11% of the vote in 2012 presidential election, 20% in 2017, and 22% in 2022. But at a certain point, Mélenchon seems to have changed his strategy, considering that he will not be able to win without a kind of left-wing alliance. The new strategy is to unite with the rest of the left while maintaining his hegemony in it. This strategy is a total failure. The Socialist Party is back in force, and even remember they do less than 2% at the last presidential election. They are back in force, and even the former President François Hollande is now an MP of the Popular Front. A minute, okay, thank you. And if you compare 2022 and 2024, while the National Rally has doubled its number of MPs, so has the Socialist Party. Only Melenchon movement has only one fewer MP than in 2022. So Melenchon's strategic choices have not been right, either in terms of principle or even from an electoral point of view. The actual situation makes me think about a sentence. It will be the only one, I promise, of Marx, you know, in the book, the 18 Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte. I quote, Hegel remarks that all great world historic facts and personages appear, so to speak, twice. He forgot to add the first time as a tragedy, the second time as a farce. So in the 30s, our parents or grandparents have experienced a tragedy, and today we are witnessing a farce. In 1936, the Popular Front was an electoral alliance between parties claiming to be revolutionary and socialist, the Communist Party and the Socialist Party, and a party representing the secular left wing of the liberal bourgeoisie, the Radical Party. Today, there is nothing popular about the so-called new Popular Front. The social basis of communist, socialist, rebellious, the Mélenchon's movement, and green left is only in the educated, urban, pretty bourgeoisie. In fact, it's mainly among public sector employees and part of what the French sociologist Alain Vire calls the capitalist management class. And of course, none of the left-wing parties is proposing anything even remotely related to an exit from capitalism. The New Popular Front program is vaguely Keynesian, but it's entirely within the framework of the respect for the budgetary organization and claims to combat public deficits. The left, we has lost all links with historic socialism and the workers, create myths to mobilize young students and the pretty bourgeoisie in the metropolis. But the so-called New Popular Front had nothing to do with the one of the 30s. Anyway, I draw your attention on one point. In fact, the proletarian revolutionaries have always been opposed to Popular Front, whether in France, Spain, USA, under the Roosevelt period, and later in Chile. And we have 1,000 reasons to oppose the current caricature. A rotten bloc that doesn't agree on anything. They don't agree on the war in Ukraine. They don't agree on Gaza, Palestine, Israel. They don't agree on nuclear power and the fight against global warming. They don't agree on secularism. They don't agree on identity politics. Even worse is the electoral pact with Macron on the second round of the election. For over 40 years now, political life in France has been organized around the fight against a so-called fascist threat that doesn't exist. Former socialist Prime Minister Lionel Jospin admitted that all of that was, I quote, theater. But I would add that if they were fascist threat, the response will not be a political bloc with the bourgeoisie, or even with the left on the electoral ground, because nobody has the right to forbid the Revolutionary Party to present its full program to the workers. The response would have been a bloc in the street, the unity of workers in the workers' militia to smash the fascists. But everyone understands that this has nothing to do with the reality we live in. The reality is that the social liberal government has pushed back the retirement date by 2 years. The reality is that we have a power who don't trust his administration and use McKinsey likes to define his own politics. We have a power who sell the country and develop foreign trade deficit, a power which acts provocatively abroad, reducing French influence. And now we act in an irresponsible way, risking to drag the world into a war with Russia. A power with Blairite politics, but the methods of a police state. Remember the people mutilated or put in jail during the Yellow Vest movement. But everything we have seen since the election, it's an electoral operation to save Emmanuel Macron, which just goes to show that the New Popular Front, it's merely the left wing of a failed liberalism. So some ask what is the way forward for the French working class? I think the way forward is to win back class independence. but it's going to be a long road. Firstly, because, for example, strikes are at their lowest level since 1975. They don't stop to fall. Every year, less and less strikes. And because the trade union movement in France is both weak and, I learned a word in English, subservient to the parliamentary left. And the working class needs an organization which is not the spare wheel of liberalism, but which is able to freeing workers from the influence of nationalism. And this will not be achieved by abstract proclamations, but by addressing its real problems. But I am confident, as the example of the Yellow Vest has shown, the hunger of the people will not fail to be expressed at the first opportunity. So, to my opinion, in France now, what we need is a tool, a fighting propaganda group that is capable, on the one hand, to act in the battle of ideas, and on the other, of intervening in the class struggles by turning toward the deepest layers of society. This is the task I intend to tackle in the coming months, and I think we're waiting too long, and now it's time to clarity.
Okay, Raymond. Just on a point of clarification, on the use of the word fascism on the introduction, I intentionally put that word in as a provocation to get your clarification in return. I also do that in daily life because we have embryonic groupings here who see themselves as far left, and they are far left. But in order to raise people's consciousness of the consequences, if the far left ever become powerful, I use the word fascist to describe their origin and to raise the question of their future.
You mean the far right, Jimmy?
Sorry, far right. My apologies. Yeah, head is gone. We now open the meeting to the board. I see Ian and Roger both have their hands up. So I'll take them in that order. And I would ask anybody who wants to come in to speak and try and consciously allow time for others to come in, because the way these meetings operate is that we don't restrict people to a single contribution, that you may come back in, as indeed Raymond himself may come in centrally in the meeting to clarify or develop points that are being raised from the discussion. So start with Matthew and then follow with Roger, and if anybody else wants to come, please raise your hand. Matthew?
Raise his hand before me.
Sorry, Jimmy, can I make a point before we start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the most important discussion before us is what's happening in France today and perspectives for the future. I just hope we don't spend long periods of time going over what happened in the 1930s and the Popular Front in the 1930s and contrasting it with today. Raymond has covered that point quite well. But I do think we should focus very much on what's happening in France today. And I think that Raymond's discussion there really threw down the gauntlet to the comrades, because we're in a situation which is very, very new, and the analysis Raymond presented there, there's nothing idealistic about it. It's a very sober analysis, and I think it's one we have to take stock of and process the implications of it, as well as maybe ask questions around it. So I just appeal to comrades, focus on the now, not the 30s, okay?
As long as we don't forget the past, Joe.
No, there's no danger of that, Jimmy. No danger.
Okay, right. Now, and go back to Matthew and ask again if he's prepared to come in.
I know, just say Roger was down to speak before me.
I apologize to Roger, but all I'm doing is responding to the order as it appears on this screen.
Okay,
So
can you hear me okay?
go ahead, Roger. Or sorry, go ahead, Matthew.
No, I just think
After you, whoever
All right.
wants to speak now. I'm ready whenever you like. Okay.
Okay. No, I just say I think there's a couple of things that strike me immediately. One, of course, is that obviously this comes in the wake of the huge fight on pensions, which was conducted obviously in the streets and with enormous demonstrations and so on, in an effort actually, I mean, the logic of it was to bring down Macron. And of course, lacking the political leadership, I mean, none of the parties were prepared to actually wage that fight to say, well, the working class should bring down Macron. And of course, eventually that fight was effectively sold out. Macron was able to impose cuts in pensions. So, I mean, in those terms, the other question, of course, as you say, in terms of the unions, and the problem is with, as far as I understand it, with French unions, of course, is that the rate of membership in the French working class of unions is very small. But the unions are, of course, then essentially dependent on the employers and the state who pay for the apparatus. And therefore, effectively, the union bureaucracy doesn't work for the membership. It works for the state and the apparatus of the companies. I mean, things like outfits like EDF. I mean, there's an enormous union apparatus, but all paid for by the company. So you can see the effect of that in terms of the nature of the leadership you get. But as I say, I think that was really a key fight, in those terms. I mean, I think the other thing, of course, is that obviously the rate of turnout, the rate of voting in France is slightly higher than it is here. I think you said it was, I think it was something around about 60, low 60%. Essentially you get at least a third or more of people who don't vote. Whereas here it's about half this time around. So essentially you've got a whole section of the population just says, well, we've no interest in these elections because nobody's there to represent us.
Thank you, Matthew. Roger, and then Norma after Roger.
So you're calling me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's very good to see Raymond again. I want to welcome him back. We haven't seen him for a while. And as always, his contributions are very useful, very sometimes provocative. And that's what we need in order to stimulate a healthy discussion. And I'd like to raise a number of things that really, I'm really asking for clarification. The situation in France, although there is similarities with the countries all over Europe, there are some very, very special features, as always in France, and it's sometimes a little difficult for comrades in Britain and other countries too, perhaps, to know quite what's the correct analysis and understanding and program and just generally which fits with the very peculiar situation in France. So first of all, Raymond discounts the characterization of Le Pen's party as fascist. Of course, we don't have anywhere in Europe or in the world today any mass fascist parties. We saw perhaps a little hint of that in Greece some years back. But nevertheless, the far-right parties are something distinctive from the traditional bourgeois parties, and they are a particularly sinister threat because of their use of racism and the fact that they do harbour fascist tendencies and fascist kind of inspiration in their ranks. And I do think that it was correct to make the maximum effort to see the National Rally as more of a threat than simply the old traditional bourgeois parties of France, of Macron, and of course Macron is not a traditional party, and that's one of the features in France. So there doesn't seem to be any one single stable traditional party of the ruling class. We had Gaullism, and then we had Macron, and now the Le Pen's party is trying to replace Macron as a kind of mainstream voice of the ruling class. But we see the same thing all over Europe. We see the same thing with Meloni in Italy, and I don't need to list all the other examples. Comrades are very familiar with them. It seems to me neither Le Pen nor Meloni appears to be anything like the traditional fascists of the past. But nevertheless, I think it's true to say that they are fascists. But the difference is that they do not have the means to impose a fascist program. They don't. They are actually they are kind of forerunners or precursors of a what they want to be, a future aspirant, if you like, fascist force. I think, I mean, the fact particularly that they use racism and including encouragement of extra parliamentary means, if you like, in order to enforce their role. I mean, they are a deadly threat. Now, what do we do in response to that? Of course, we know about the history of the Popular Front, and don't worry, Joe, I'm not going to talk about the 30s, but what I am going to do, since Raymond drew the distinction, we also need to make the distinction. What is this also a Popular Front, as we saw in the 1930s? It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, as I say, France is a rather unfamiliar terrain for a lot of us, but it seems to me that it was not a traditional Popular Front. It was not a betrayal in that sense for Melenchon to unite with the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, and I suppose the Greens. I don't think that makes it a Popular Front in the sense that in any way comparable to that of the 30s, which involved a direct party of the bourgeoisie. That's the radicals. It seems to me the Socialists, we know their crimes, we know their betrayals, we know all of that, but the same was true with the SPD in the 1930s in Germany, and Trotsky was in favor of the Communist Party making a united front with the SPD in order to block the rise of Hitler. And it seems to me that it was not a completely treacherous policy, if you like. It was certainly not on a scale of the Popular Front of the 1930s to make that block. I do think, though, that to make an electoral pact, as they did in the second round with Macron, that is Popular Frontism. That was unacceptable. That is something which we should rule out, which represented I think, a qualitative step back from the policy in the first round. Also, I'd ask Raymond another question in relation. He says about the low strike tally in the recent period. That may be so, but surely again we have to say there's a large tradition in France of spontaneity in the working class. In 1968, it was not mainly unionized workers who staged the uprising in which 10 million workers occupied their factories. That came largely outside the union structures, and we have seen a lot of non-union militancy, if you like, on the streets in France in the recent period. The Gilets jaunes, for instance, the youth uprising after the murder of that immigrant worker, young person, and so on. I mean, I would think that to simply gauge the militancy, if you like, of the French working class simply by looking at the trade union membership or trade union activity is surely too narrow a gauge, too narrow a criterion. I think that's about all I want to say, but I think I'd be very interested to hear Raymond's answers. I'm not trying to oppose what he's saying or to counter it, but I'm asking him really to comment, because I think we need to have a kind of deeper understanding of some of these points.
Okay, comrades, the next speaker is Norma, and on my list here I have Ian, and then at that stage I would ask if Raymond would like to come in, and when we return from Raymond we have Joe and Matthew again. So Norma first, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you, and thanks, Raymond. I agree with your analysis, and of course, there are what we are asked here is to see for the present and the possibility to propose for the future to solve some.
Comrade Norma, we're having trouble with the sound quality.
Oh, I'm sorry. Have you heard me? Have you heard me?
I can get you, but it's not great quality.
I'm sorry.
You want to try again?
Yes. Well, I summarize. It's okay?
That's a lot better, yes.
I summarize. So, I agree with Raymond analysis, and what we are asked here is to analyze the present, and it's possible to propose something to solve some of the problems. And so, of course, I cannot make a synthesis or a big proposal, but just to pick some points. One of the problems, and is in Raymond, but I try to complete, and it's centralism of France, the central role of the urban cities. I live in France, so I know a little bit. And that is one of the problems, that all this so-called popular front, which is not popular at all, is more a phenomenon of urban or peri-urban city places. There is also the common problems in Europe. This what is happening in France have also, we see, mentioned Italy, and other countries can be mentioned too. I mean, the particularity in France also is that we have seen many street manifestations, and there are strong manifestation and trade unions very active. But we don't have political leadership for that. The political leaders of coming from the basis, not the apparatus which we know there are there, then make recycling themselves and so on. When we have seen strikes, we have seen really on real popular movement in those strikes, and we have seen real leadership, real leaders coming from the basis, but then after have not been translated completely in political. One of those movements which appear so-called spontaneously are not in the urban people, more in the peripheric and in the territoire, was the Yellow Gilet movement. And then the so-called now popular front, the leaders of the so-called New Popular Front, were very slow to react to that. And because the Gilets jaunes were not emerged from those traditional political parties, they have not recognized it rapidly. And that was a problem because it was, I can make a direct testimony, témoignage. It was a big repression. I never seen in France, I mean, in the last 40 I have not seen in France so big repression. People which were arrested, and because it was very strong. People have decided to fix some things of the system. And really, they were not a leadership and a companion, a political who were at the head of that movement. Then after, of course, things appear against, and I mean, usually, and then there were restrictions about fascist movement or much more on what is called societal movements, societal reivindication, which are good. But the left was in some kind of diversion, making the movements for not such kind of viand, of not make barbecues. I mean, they were caricature when people really need political answers. And so the answer of all that is then when the people need to make, a direct act of democracy by the vote, through the vote, this kind of reactions, and then we have. So,
Comrade Norma, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
yes,
the quality is fading again, and it's not fair to you.
Now.
Would you like to come back in on another connection and return to your discussion?
Again now, okay?
Yeah,
okay.
You're clear at that, yes.
So again, I said, take for instance, remember Davos summit, Davos in Switzerland, and they even take all these kind of societal problems. They make they formulate a kind of capitalism of modern times, in which you have all these so-called values which are shared by some left and some Greens movements. Capitalism of green, capitalism responsible, capitalism, well, they don't call capitalism, but, and so it's some kind of diversion. And the left in France, this front is also in this game. Perhaps they are not constant. So again and again, the real problem is to have a political leadership and to real analyze. It have not been analyzed the real movement of the Gilets jaunes, of the yellow gilets, and that is needed. Thank you very much.
Comrade, your sound has gone completely.
Yeah, thank you, Norma.
But I ask you to reconnect, and we come back to you again.
I think she has finished.
You think, okay, quality just dropped off me completely. I lost all sound.
Maybe she's in Argentina.
Okay. Well, I thank the comrade, and I thank everybody for patience with the quality, but it is important. What we're going to do now is I'm going to ask Ian to come in, and then Raymond come back in, should he wish. And then after that, Matthew had his hand, Joe, and then Matthew.
I'm on the bus right now. I'll be off at the next stop, but maybe get the next comrade in first before me. I want to avoid further polity issues.
Okay, what I'll do then, Matthew, I don't. There is Matthew. Was it a question or clarification that you wanted to make?
I just wanted to say so very briefly. Actually, I think the key here, obviously, is the difference between a united front, which is Trotsky's. And it actually, of course, goes back to the discussions in the Comintern in the first four Congresses, and the Popular Front. And the point being, as Trotsky makes in his extended discussion of fascism in Germany, of course, is that a united front allows all the parties to maintain their political programs while agreeing, on the points, in terms of challenging the fascists. The difference, of course, is with the Popular Front is that the left itself, and LFI in particular, gave up its politics and acted essentially to resuscitate the PS, as Raymond has said. That's the difference. And therefore, the NPF winds up with this right-wing politics in terms of supporting the war of Ukraine and so on. And supporting Hollande. I mean, one of the most loathed people in France. And so, I mean, that's the thing. Is the left really should say, well, we're happy to have a united front, but it means that we can maintain our politics and our positions and our critique of whoever, even with parties we've reached a limited agreement with. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Raymond?
Yeah, I think that Norma answered a part of the question asked by Roger. So it was a bit difficult with the communication, but I think so. About how to consider the national rally. I have almost the same opinion than you, Roger. Almost the same ideas 30 years ago, but I think it was a mistake, in fact, because the program it's not to smash the workers' movement. The program is not to abolish the parliamentary democracy. And it's a fully a party fully integrated in the electoral system. 200%. They accuse the Melenchon to be against to organize demonstration, to be against the electoral system. They are not like this, and so you can always find some people in the margin, but it's like in the left. You will find in Melenchon movement people who have a far left background. For example, I know personally some MPs. Alexis Corbière, who was expelled by Mélenchon 2 weeks ago. It's one of the main leaders of the Mélenchon movement, but who was re-elected as an independent. This guy, I know him since 40 years. He was in jail because he supported the nationalist movement in the Basque country, so it's not enough to have a point of view on this kind of movement, I think. If you take, I don't know very well, but if you take the FPO in Austria, I think it's the far right party, the most connected with the tradition of the 30s, and they come to power, they win elections, they lose election, they stop with the power, and so and so. They are fully in the electoral system. In Italy with the Lega, it's the same. So I don't think we must continue to think that they can pose a kind of fascist threat, even indirect. If you take their program, le plus, en français on dit le plus clivant. I don't know the word in English. The main aspect of that program, it's on immigration, to be hard on the immigration issues. But they are far less radical than the British Tories. In fact, they are far more humanist, you know, and they don't choose openly racism. They have black people elected. They have Arab people elected as MPs now. So it's a few. It's few for the left also. they are all white people. The leadership of the left. So and the National Rally has strong results in all the former colonies. For example, in Mayotte, which is a small island, but with a lot of immigration problems. I don't know if everybody knows the Comore Island. Strong immigration problems. So the black Muslim people from Mayotte, they vote for the National Rally without problem. About the how to characterize the left, I agree that even the Socialist Party, it's not a direct agent of the French bourgeoisie or the Greens. Or I agree with this, but all these parties are, include Melenchon party, despite his rhetoric, are pro-capitalist party. So there is no problem, because in fact you don't have any kind of socialist party in the electoral spectrum. You only have pro-capitalist parties, and they all have been, you know, in France we have I think it's the same in Britain, we have a kind of union for the bosses, and all the political parties in France have talked to the bosses union rally to explain, don't fear about us, it will not, we will not have any problem with us, and so and so. So it's different on this. It's different because there are no bourgeois party, but they are pro-bourgeois party, all of them, and they are not independent socialist voice in the electoral system in France now. I agree also on the spontaneity. It's the reason why I was confident. But as Norma said, there is no political tradition of the people's revolt. The story of the Youth, I think it's a bit different. It's too long to enter this debate. I don't think it's exactly the same. But if you take the Yellow Vests, they have spontaneous leaders, national leaders, but no electoral repercussion of this.
Okay, Raymond, thank you. I now have two more names. Joe I'm going to call on next, and then I'm going to give Ian a shout immediately behind him. Now, after that, the screen is blank. So if any other comrade wishes to come in after Ian, can you please signal as soon as possible? Joe?
I'm not sure where to go with this. Raymond, it's going to take time to absorb what you're saying and to think about it properly. So I'm just going to give you a few knee-jerk reactions, okay? It seems to me that you're outlining a situation of almost absolute despair inside France at the moment. It's a realistic picture on the basis of the statistics that you provided. And I would actually ask you to go back and clarify those figures again, because I didn't get what they were. You gave figures for 51% of a section of workers voted for a national rally, 54% in another section, 59% in another. That was in your opening introduction. Could you just go back over those figures now before I continue?
Yes, I tried. I tried to. I don't know if I have the figures here. No, unfortunately. I tried to give figures of the two. Okay, I said it in another way. The National Rally has its roots in the working class. His roots are not the pretty bourgeoisie, the classical pretty bourgeoisie, like in the 30s. Sorry to talk about the 30s. Yeah. It's not this kind of people. It's the blue collar working class. If you take the map of the vote, it's the where you remember with Trump and what they call the black belt who vote for Trump in the USA. It's the same. It's the same thing in France with the National Rally. So if you have former areas with a strong tradition, workers' tradition, they have all the MPs.
Yeah. On
the card. So I give details about the blue collar workers, 51%, the white collar workers, 45%. It was the reason why I put this. And if you take the people without diploma, they vote for the National Rally. The people who go to the university, they vote for the left. It's what Norma explained also. There is a total break in France since a long time between the left and the working class. I think it's a bit different, for example, in Britain with the Labour Party, the links with the unions and so on. But you don't have anything like this in France. So so the vote of the left is a vote of the pretty bourgeoisie and the big towns, and the vote of the National Rally is a vote of the countryside and the farmers and the countryside, the small towns and the industrial areas. And it was stronger 5 years ago. For example, if you take the vote at the last presidential elections, because they have more voters now, so they are able to reach more people outside the working class, the National Rally. But they have a base in the electoral base, not militant, electoral base in the working class, which is far bigger than the CP even in the 50s. So it's the problem, and you cannot address this issue. I say you, not you. With you're bad people, you're racist, and so on. It's not possible. If you do this, you vote for Macron. It's exactly what they do, but not me.
Yeah. Okay, Raymond. Joe, are you happy to carry on?
Sorry.
Joe?
Sorry, you're talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say that no, you're bearing out a lot of what I know already. I would have read a lot from that guy called Edward Louis and Didier Eberon. I don't know whether you know these guys. These are from the north of France who grew up in areas which were, when they were growing up as teenagers, the majority of the population voted Communist Party, and it was 60% votes for the Communist Party and so on. And en masse, these same areas are now voting for National Rally. And it's almost like a complete reverse of the situation. So I'm not surprised, but I do think that because what you're saying is so radically different from the expectations that a lot of people would have of who National Rally are, it's important to actually really clarify them and to give those examples that you've just given, okay? Now, where I'm going to just maybe try to take the discussion is, well, if the social composition of National Rally is, as you said, overwhelmingly working class, I'm not saying its financial structure is overwhelmingly working class, but like certainly that's the social composition of the National Rally. The NFP, by contrast, you're in a way dismissing it because equally of its social composition as well as its politics and the internal divisions between the groups. But if we were to compare in 1968, to go back to 68 again, the original student strikes, everything could have been dismissed on grounds of the social composition of the participants. Everything could have been dismissed on the grounds that these are just lower middle class students moaning about whatever, right? But yet within 6-8 weeks later on, they had acted as a catalyst. And what I'm going to ask you is it possible that the very evolution of the NFP, can that act as a catalyst for a discussion on where to bring France, how to bring France forward, what is the future for workers in France and so on? Can it act as a catalyst? I would imagine that in the wake of such an election, that France would be effectively in political ferment, in the sense that there's an awful lot of discussions taking place in the colleges and in the universities, but also I would imagine within other organizations, even unions, political parties, the Socialist Party, France Insoumise, Communist Party, there must be a certain level of ferment there. So if there's discussions taking place there, can somehow your organization, can you be involved in those discussions? Can things be moved forward in any way? We've heard reference to United Front there. Can there be some sort of an agreement worked out amongst people on the far left who oppose trying to find solutions on the basis of continued cooperation with the business sector and capitalism and so on? Is like, what is the way forward? What can you advocate for a young person who's maybe got illusions in the New Front Populaire and so on? What can you advocate for them? How can you raise their sights? Because there's a need to bring something more to the table than just we have the answer in our small little program and our membership of 20 people nationally or whatever. Like, we have to have something which is established, has some credibility for bringing an alternative that can work forward, and it has to be an alternative that can be seen to maybe bring together the best people who are willing to discuss a future for France on the basis of a workers' program.
Okay,
I
Joe.
hope I'm being clear. I know I'm a little bit vague, but I hope I'm being clear enough.
Yeah, well, I'll ask Raymond to take up those points in his summing up, Joe. I'm going to thank Ian for his patience and give him the floor now. I just want to clarify, Dominic's name lit up there for a while. I just want to check if he's in a position to follow Ian. Ian, you go ahead anyway.
Hi, thank you. I'm sorry I had a few tech issues myself earlier because I was out and about, so I've not caught everything that everybody's said. I was originally meaning to come in at the very start because I've been thinking a lot about France in the last week or so. So some of this might be more a response to the lead off and some of my own thoughts about the thing. Though the last discussion was particularly interesting. I think that after the election we've just gone through in Britain, it's kind of a natural tendency on the left to see France in a very positive light in comparison to that. I think the difference between Starmer and Melenchon as the key figure of the broadly defined left of centre is quite a stark one. I think it's obviously gone a bit too far in some quarters. I saw on one of my many election WhatsApp groups, somebody even comparing the whole of the NFP favourably to the likes of Navarra Media and Owen Jones, as far to the left of those softer sectors of Corbynism, which I'd have a lot of criticisms of myself. But then, given that the NFP includes the the PS, that's not the whole story about them if you look closer. But the fact that Melenchon as a left outsider has been able to an extent to hegemonize them now twice, with Nukes a couple of years ago, and now the NFP, as opposed to the left and the Labour Party being smashed and the left outside the Labour Party yet to get up off the ground, with a few exceptions like Islington North, is quite a stark one. And on the other hand, it seems to have now rehabilitated the Socialist Party to an extent on the coattails of the further left. But that's obviously a very different position from the commanding position Starmer's in the Labour Party right now. So I think Raymond has provided quite a provocative corrective to some of the hype. I think maybe you bent the step a little bit too far in the other direction in some ways too. I think I agree with Roger's position on fascism. We had a similar discussion a few weeks ago about fascism in India. I think the NF and the RSS core of Modi's party have in some ways very similar histories of deep roots and inspiration from, or in terms of France, membership of classical European fascism. Long marches through the wilderness and the institutions, and building a real network of organisations on the ground that swooped in multi-generationally after the Second World War as the system increasingly goes into collapse and disillusionment. But I think there are these links, and I think we can't dismiss it in terms of the NF. Even Jean-Marie Le Pen Senior, is now seen as one of the more embarrassing ultra-right figures. If he's still even in the party, I think his daughter expelled him a few years ago. When he was picked in the 70s as the front man, it was because he was a moderate compared to the forces that were really setting it up. The party treasurer was a veteran of the Waffen SS, and Le Pen himself was seen as less tarnished by provable terrorism in the OSS gang, as opposed to just being a state brute in Algeria as a paratrooper who openly tortured people. I don't know about openly, but it's quite clearly tortured people. But he at least wasn't involved in trying to kill de Gaulle that we know of. So it's got very extreme roots. It may have tempered them somewhat to get into power. But I mean, hypocrisy is a thing in fascism when they're attacking Melenchon for being anti-systemic. Well, they would, wouldn't they, about the left? And I think the idea that it's symmetrical with the issues on the left, where some of them are softer than others or than their original roots. It's not the same thing, though, when they're a party of the extreme right and of capital wanting to bear down, maybe not with a complete dictatorship, but more heavily than even an ordinary conservative party would if they do get into power. Maybe authoritarianism light as opposed to totalitarianism. But in terms of their history and their racism, there's a real thing there, as opposed to just being the conservatives, who, incidentally, the actual Conservative Party, the party of the guy some of Le Pen's mates tried to kill back in the day, de Gaulle, has split. There's two leaderships claiming leadership over the Republicans, isn't there, over whether to cooperate with the fascists or not. So it seems that on all three wings of French politics, the extreme centre of Macron, obviously with a startup party, the far right with Le Pen, and also the left, where the biggest segment is not the Socialist Party or the Communists, but LFI. And I don't mean Labour Friends of Israel there. It's funny, LFI can mean different things in different countries. I was thinking the other day that all three sections have new, or maybe not so new in terms of the NF, but previously fringe elements coming to the lead because the official centre has collapsed. I do wonder how Macron will find it governable now. I think he may, I don't know what Raymond thinks, try and do a deal with both the Republicans and maybe Socialist Party type elements, splitting them away from the NPF to try and find some kind of governing centre. And I think in terms of the United Front, where you can be united for a very specific time and then depart under your own programmes again. That's kind of already happened once with Melenchon in the last couple of years, that the nukes broke up over his position on Ukraine as opposed to that of the Socialist Party. I think one of the most negative elements of the situation was that he did allow their programme to be adopted by the wider thing, this time in the NPF, but I wouldn't rule out it being broken up again. I've seen some people saying that actually the NF got the most votes in France. Now, in terms of most, well, I've seen some people saying that they got the majority of votes. In terms of majority, as 50% plus one, that's categorically false. They did get the most votes. They got 33% as opposed to, I think, 28 and 24 for Melenchon and Macron's electoral groups, respectively. And it is because of the French system, the runoffs, the vote switching, that they didn't do better. But I think there's a very positive side of that too, which is that the cordon sanitaire around the extreme right has held up at base. And it's not a class vote for the NF in the way that Raymond was saying, at least not fully. That might be true in certain sectors. It's worrying that it's as high as it is. But there's by far a bigger, for now, anti-fascist common and good sense at the base that united between different parties, whoever was best to beat the fascists in the individual seats. And that's a good thing, especially given that that's at the base. But at the top of at least one of those sides that were vote splitting between each other in terms of Macron, that doesn't seem to be the case because he called this election needlessly, it seems, in order to want to bring the far right to power. Albeit there's a cunning plan that they'll come into power, they won't do very well. In 3 years' time, it will actually undermine them for the presidency. But you don't play around with the far right like that. I mean, Hindenburg and von Papen thought they'd hired Hitler, and it turned out he was rather more in the saddle than them within a couple of months. So even if it wouldn't have gone in that way, it's a ridiculously unprincipled, reckless thing that Macron did, and his own base, much of which he had only by being the alternative to the far right, seemed to have seen that. So absent the extremely clarifying situation of, say, Macron had dropped out and it was Melenchon versus Le Pen, who would he have endorsed? Maybe he'd have gone as far as he could to endorse Le Pen or seen them both as the two extremes. And there was shades of that very much in this election too, especially in the first round. This has been quite clarifying, and it might lead it to be more likely for it to be a runoff between Melenchon or whoever his candidate is and Le Pen next time, and with perhaps better prospects of the left beating the far right at that election than we'd have thought from looking at the standpoint of official politics, where they had been brought very much into the system in the last few years, and Macron was largely a preparatory regime for Le Pen, up to wanting to get them into power, if only to undermine them this time round. So it's good, I think, that 2/3 of ordinary people in France did do that. I've seen some people say it's an establishment stitch-up against the far right. That's how they'll play it. But it seems in some ways the opposite. The establishment wanted to stitch up to get them in, if only to work them over. But the people didn't want to take that chance, and we should see that as a positive. And perhaps whether he wants it or not, there'll also be a breakup between Melenchon and the SP down the line. So I do see things slightly more positively than Raymond, if not quite as positively as those who see the whole of the NFP as to the left of anything particularly mainstream in Britain. It's a complicated situation, but I think there are positives there, especially the anti-fascist good sense of the people, although it is worrying that in certain sectors the NF, you were saying, was even over 50%. But in terms of the country as a whole, it's 2/3 against them, and quite militantly against them, more than they're against anybody else, which the more that can be held up, the better. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Full of information as ever. Thank you, comrade. Dominic, next, please.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused. I mean, the situation as I see is we shouldn't be looking at it as it stands now, is what it's going to look like in a couple of years' time, a year or two's time. Because I think this sort of popular front government is going to be very unstable. And the question I'm interested in is, where do the capitalists stand in this? Because the capitalists are in a position to bring down a government within hours almost, if they decide to destabilise it. Because I don't think the programme of this popular front is going to work unless it's pro-capitalist. And then where you are with the rest of the people, the working class, middle class, and what have you. So if you have a destabling effect on the economy, and the popular front turning to the capitalists to get them out of that situation, I think the what do you call it? The far right, I've forgotten the name. National Resistance, is it? National Rally, will be in a real position to take over. But then what confuses me is the normal role of a fascist government is to smash the organised working class in order to drive down the wages and conditions of the workers and increase the profits of the capitalists. Might be a bit simplistic, but that's the role of them. And how do they do that with a base of 50% workers who are, whether they're organised or not, are still going to be attacked by the policies of that government? I just find the whole situation extremely confusing, and I don't see anybody, apart from talking in terms of this organisation and that organisation, of any programmes, because the only thing the Popular Front can be a left organisation on is not what leadership, but what programme they're going to carry out and how are they going to carry that programme out in the interest of the working class, which will mean directly opposing the interest of the capitalist class. So it's a question of what's going on among the class struggle rather than, who voted for who, because votes can change very quickly, as we saw in this election in Britain, where basically the majority of people voted against Labour. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Dominic. Norma, your flag is up again. Want to go ahead?
Hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you very, very faintly, Norma.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now again.
Thank you very much. Very shortly, just to complete or to add, I don't think that spending time in analyzing Melenchon, I mean, the leaders we have now at hand. I mean, it was mentioned Melenchon or Le Pen or others. In this parties we have, I am speaking in general, statistical average. It will give us a solution. I think we need to go deeper in those countrysides and trade union and the basic people, which really participated and participate, and which have not have not been given the opportunity or the power to emerge as leaders. The yellow billets, and there are others, I mean, different in different places, and which are very able, and I mean, in the still, as Raymond said, it's a true reality that the power of the political power is in the cities, in the closed circles already established, and then it's a problem to go ahead. And so, speaking about the apparatus and the people there, we know is speaking about the superficiality we see, which is in at the surface. We need to go deeper to find, really search. I think that we will be able to compose or to organize or to give possibility to people to organize, which have not been the case. And I think we here have a hole to pay still to yellow movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Norman. I don't see anybody else's hand up at the moment. Raymond, do you want to come back in now? And
Okay.
more or less summarize the discussions? Sorry, Roger, you have your hand up as well. You want to say something now?
Just to see, excuse me, just to see what Raymond think about my last comment. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Roger, do you want to take
Okay, just
take
very,
the floor, rather?
very, very quickly, just 1 or 2 points. This question about the Popular Front and the United Front, of course, Matthew is right that the one of the elements in the situation is that Trotsky was in favor of complete freedom of debate and criticism between the parties, and the criticism of the policies of the Socialist and Communist parties. But that is not the definition of a Popular Front. They were absolutely right, in my opinion, to make an electoral block in the first round. I may be wrong, and I'm willing to learn why I'm wrong, but I think the fact is that it was not the Popular Front as it was in the 1930s, because it didn't include any party that was directly an agency of the bourgeoisie. The Socialist Party was no more corrupt and no more reactionary than the SPD in Germany was, and Trotsky was in favor of a bloc between the Communist and the Social Democratic parties in Germany. So that's the first thing. And I have a reason that the reason why I kind of want to make a point of that is that in the past, the French left has been absolutely cursed with sectarianism, and we saw situations in previous elections where if the left parties, if we can use that word, but you know what I'm talking about, the Socialist Party, Melenchon's party, the Communist Party, and the little sects as well, that if they had made some kind of electoral bloc, then actually they could have affected the overall results. There would have been even, I think I'm right in saying, there would have been even an outside chance that Melenchon could have been elected president in the previous elections. But they do I mean the last ones or the ones before? I'm getting confused now. But anyway, that in the past there has been a sectarianism, which we still see, of course. We still have the same curse in Britain, where we saw, as I keep repeating, and in the election recently in my constituency, we had 6 different left candidates competing with each other against the Tories and Labour. On the question of Raymond says, look, you know, the National Rally is no more to the no further to the right than the Tory party. and he said, for instance, they have black members. Remember that the Tory party, half the cabinet were black. It's not. That's not really a token. The Farage's party has black members too, token renegades, if you like. So I don't think that that is that doesn't convince me. Put it that way. I'd also remind comrades that both Hitler and Mussolini, in a certain sense, came to power constitutionally. They came to power. They were appointed by the constitutional authorities in both cases, by the king and by the chancellor. Not is it they call them the chancellor or the president in Germany. But in any case, I mean, these are quibbles. The point is, I think that the program we should be suspicious. The fact is that the National Rally, like the so-called Brothers of Italy, they put forward a policy which doesn't seem to be very different from that of the traditional right-wing parties, but nevertheless, they do have a particular racist angle, and they represent a threat, and people see it. Well, it was clear in France the reason why they were defeated in the second round is surely that there was a huge national kind of resurgence of horror, of disgust, of thinking we must keep these people out of power. And I'm not saying that they're fascist regimes. I'm saying that they are, because they don't have the street power. They don't have the forces and the resources at the current time to enforce a fascist program. They don't have stormtroopers. They don't have the fighters on the streets, and therefore they're parliamentary at this stage. But nevertheless, I think the instinct of large sections of the French population that they constitute a mortal danger, we must keep them out at all costs. I think that's something that we should respect and appreciate. So I'd put it like that. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, comrades.
Okay, Roger, thank you. No other flags up. Okay, Raymond, we're back to you now.
So I don't will comment all the points because it will be too long. About the fascist threat, you have far right parties who had the power in Europe, in Italy, 2 times, in Netherlands, in Slovakia, in Finland,
Exactly.
and sorry.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you.
And other country, and they never used this position to establish a kind of fascist state or something. You can we can say that, and even on issues like immigration, if you take Giorgia Meloni in Italy, she she changed his position in 6 months. She was elected to stop immigration, and 6 months later she regularized 500,000 immigrants in Italy, because she followed the way of the European Union, you know. So I think it's an important point, because it determines in part the tactics. But on the electoral issues, maybe it's a kind of difference of culture. In Britain, you have the culture of the Labour Party. It's a kind of electoral united front, but and in France not, of course. But when all the ancestors talk about the united front, I don't think that they talk about the elections. It's a political bloc. It's not exactly the same thing. Anyway, about Le Pen and other, yes, Le Pen was expelled, and and Le Pen was not a strictly fascist. You know, we have this issue in France, which is the Algeria war, and you have the people who stay for who want to keep Algeria in France, and you find in those people you find a lot of fascists, but you find also left people, even François Mitterrand, who was the main socialist leader during the 60s and the 70s, and later French president 2 times. During the Algeria war, he was Minister of Justice, and he refused to. He condemned French communists to be executed because they support the Algeria. So Le Pen was a part of this tradition, and the far right support Le Pen. But Le Pen was. I don't know if you heard about the Poujade movement. It was a kind of revolt, electoral revolt of the middle class in the 50s. And he was a Poujade MP, you know. So it was a historical point about the left and the contradiction today. He should take question like the European Union and like Ukraine war. You have opposite positions. The leader of the Socialist Party during the European election, Glucksmann, this guy is to support fully Ukraine. This guy is on the right of Macron on the issue of the Ukraine war, and this guy is 200% pro European Union, even on the right, almost on the right of Macron, if it's possible, on this issue. And on the other side, the Melenchon movement, they act a bit like you remember the Respect movement. It's a bit this kind of, you know, way to organize the things. So there is a total opposition on the Gaza issue between the Socialist Party and the Melenchon movement. So to say some words about the balance between the two, today Melenchon has 74 MPs, and the Socialist Party 69. So it's not a big difference. And you have the Communists and the Greens, and the Greens and the Communists will choose the Socialist against Melenchon if there is any problem. They will not choose Melenchon against the Socialist Party. You know, that is the situation. A comrade talked about the votes. I give the figure for the vote. The vote was 7 million for the left, 6 million for Macron, and 10 million for the National Rally. So the left and the National Rally, it's one party. Even now they have a little allies. So when I said 7 million, it's the Socialists plus the Mélenchon plus the Greens plus you know, well, it's not the same thing. So to conclude, I don't think at all that I am. Norma, I fully agree. Even if it was difficult to hear you, I fully agree with all the points you made. To conclude, maybe my ideas seems to be a bit provocative in classic in left milieus, but I don't feel to be alone at all, because in fact the analysis I try to provide here is shared by a lot of people in France, in the political milieu, even for some points in the Socialist Party. Not in the LFI, because they expelled everybody who don't agree with the leader Maximo. But for example, one, I will send the link with the interview in the chat. There is an MP, a French MP. His name is François Ruffin, and I cannot copy. I cannot paste. No, I will try later. This guy, François Ruffin, was elected as an MP against the National Rally. The first time it was easy, and now it's only with a few votes and the support of the Macron people who asked to vote for him against the National Rally. This guy provides almost the same analysis that what I try to explain about the fact that we cannot oppose in French. It's the French, la France des tours et la France des bourgs. That means the French of the towers, of the suburbs, and the French of the village, the France of the village. You can not have a strategy who oppose the two. You have to talk to everybody. And the left, they have the French of the towers, but mainly the Melenchon movement, but not the French of not the country, not the rest of the country. And he explains how the strategy of Melenchon and the left is an obstacle to a possible victory. And he explained that how outside Paris, Melenchon appears to be a repulsive figure for the ordinary people. So we have the diagnosis. The point is, can somebody transform this in a kind of organization? I don't know if you follow the political life in Germany, but you have this phenomenon around Sarah Wagenknecht, former Die Linke leader, who break with Die Linke, and she found his movement 5 months before the European election, and she received 6% in only 5 months of existence, 6% in the European election. And what is interesting in the case of Sarah Wagenknecht is that she keeps 400,000 votes. She takes 400,000 votes coming from Die Linke, and she takes 200,000 votes coming from the German far right. So I think what we need is an experience of something like this, but the situation is the situation permits this, but nobody at this stage, nobody can incarnate, can represent this movement, but one day or another, a non-political figure in France will understand this, and I think we can have a political expression of this. I don't know if I was clear.
Raymond, you've been exceptionally clear and exceptionally helpful, and hopefully in the period ahead we'll see more of you and listen to more of your contributions. Roger, I want to hand back to you now to talk about the future meetings.
Yes, I'd like to say first how much I appreciate Raymond's contribution, and we've learned a lot from him. And I thank him for answering questions which might have been a bit provocative from me, but I've learned a lot from his answers. I think there's still things. I hope that we'll continue this discussion, and I hope Raymond is always welcome to participate in our meetings. The next week we are having our final meeting before the summer break, and it will be about another set of elections. We've already discussed the Indian, the British and the French elections, but the Euro elections, also important elections, took place only a month or so ago. And we have comrades Joan and Dermot from Ireland, and maybe if we're hoping that we could also get Claire Daly, who was a sort of star of the internet with her speeches as a Euro MP. And so I hope to see you all next week.
Thank you.
Okay, comrades, thank everybody.